What does a 600-pound predator want from a truck driver at 11:40 on a February night? She was standing in the center of the road, facing the truck, and she was not moving. Owen had his foot on the brake before he'd consciously registered what he was looking at. The trailer pushed from behind and the truck slid to a halt with the front bumper close enough that he could see her breath in the headlight beam. He pressed the horn. She shifted her weight and settled again. He pressed it again. She looked at the truck the way something looks when it has already considered the truck and decided the truck was not the point. Owen Garrett had been running the Inuvik supply corridor for 9 years. In 9 years, he had seen polar bears twice, both times at a distance. Both times, the bear had moved away from the road. He sat with the engine running and thought about his options. The bridge railing was on both sides. He was committed to the lane he was in. Going forward meant contact with a 600-pound predator, showing no signs of yielding the right-of-way. None of the options were good. He was still calculating when she did something he hadn't expected. She turned. Not the full about face of an animal leaving a partial turn. 45 degrees, facing the right-hand railing of the bridge. She looked back at him. Then she looked at the railing. Then at him again. Owen stared at her through the glass. The accumulated logic of 9 years on this road kept producing the same output. She was trying to show him something. He got out of the truck. This was, by any rational assessment, not the correct decision. The correct decision was to stay in the vehicle, a steel and glass enclosure that a polar bear could damage but could not easily breach, and wait for her to leave. That was the protocol. That was what 9 years of Dempster experience told him. He got out anyway. The cold hit immediately, -28, and the crosswind off the river, the kind of cold that had weight to it, that pushed against every exposed surface and found the gaps in gear with the systematic patience of something that had been doing this for 10,000 years. He kept the truck door between himself and the bear and assessed. She was 8 meters away. She had turned back to face the railing on the right side of the bridge. She was looking over it. She was not looking at him. He moved toward the railing. She watched him come. When he reached the railing and stopped beside her, 3 meters of distance, enough to make running a viable option. If she turned, she did not move toward him. She looked over the railing. She made a sound low, contained, the kind of vocalization that carried information without broadcasting it widely. Owen looked over the edge. The Peel River Bridge was an older structure deck, planks over steel crossbeams. The gap between planks wider than the code that would govern a new bridge. The kind of infrastructure that remained functional past the parameters of its original design, because replacement was expensive and it still held the weight. Between the deck surface and the first steel crossbeam below was a drop of about 2 meters. Between that crossbeam and the next was another meter. The river ice was 12 meters below that. In the space between the first and second crossbeam, on a ledge of ice that had accumulated on the upper surface of the lower beam, was a polar bear cub. It was small, 5-6 weeks old, the size of a large cat, its white fur pressing flat against the ice in the way of something that had been cold for long enough to have stopped shaking. It was looking up. It made a sound that the wind had been carrying away, which was why Owen had not heard it from the cab. He stood at the railing and looked down at it for a moment, processing. The gap between the deck planks, he measured it with his eyes, was wide enough for a cub this size to fall through if it had been pressed against the deck surface by wind or movement, or if it had simply been in the wrong place when the bear's weight shifted on the old planking. The ledge it had landed on was real and solid, but it was not large, and the temperature was -28. And small animals in the Arctic at -28 without shelter or warmth had a timeline. He looked at the mother. She was looking at the cub. She was too large, far too large to fit through the gap between planks or to navigate the crossbeam structure below. The physics were simple. She could not go down there. Owen went back to the truck. He had a winch. Every truck running the Dempster had a winch. It was not optional equipment on a road that passed through terrain capable of putting a 40,000-pound vehicle in a ditch in conditions that made outside assistance an hour away. On a good day, his was rated for 12,000 pounds, which was substantially more than he needed. And it had 100 meters of steel cable, which was also more than he needed. What he needed was to get the hook down 2.5 meters to a ledge the width of an outstretched arm, in the dark, in a crosswind, with his headlamps pointing the wrong direction. He repositioned the truck. It took 4 minutes to back it to the angle where the winch drum was over the correct side of the railing, the headlights providing oblique illumination into the space below. He rigged the cable over the railing, letting the hook descend. The wind moved it. The hook swung, caught the first crossbeam, swung back, missed the ledge. He tried to direct it. The cable was stiff in the cold. The wind was consistent and unhelpful. The angle was wrong for any kind of precision. He got the hook within a meter of the cub twice and lost it both times. The cub pressed flat. The mother was at the railing above him, watching. After the fourth attempt, something changed. He registered it peripherally first, a sound from the bridge structure, a shift in the ambient noise that he assigned to wind, before he looked and understood it was not wind. The bear was going over the railing, not jumping, lowering herself, her forepaws over the edge first, finding purchase on the outer face of the deck beam, her rear legs still on the bridge surface, her full weight beginning to transfer. The bridge structure was old steel and concrete, and it held. She moved down slowly, finding each grip with the deliberate care of an animal navigating unfamiliar terrain on which a mistake had only one outcome. Owen stood at the railing and did not move and did not make a sound. She got low enough that her forepaws reached the first crossbeam. She hooked her claws into the upper flange of the beam and held. She was hanging off the side of the Peel River Bridge in -28, 2 meters above her cub, with her body blocking the crosswind that had been making the cable impossible to direct. The cable hung straighter. She extended one foreleg toward the swinging hook. She missed it the first time it swung away from her reach. She waited for it to come back. It came back. She caught it. Owen watched her hands guide the hook toward her cub. He had only the cable in his hands and the winch control in his jacket pocket, and the understanding that whatever was happening, his job in it was clear. He waited until the hook was positioned. He pressed the lever. The winch motor ran. The cable tensioned. The cub, which had either grabbed the hook with its forepaws or had been positioned against it by the hook's contact, rose off the ledge in a single slow movement that made the motor look effortless. The mother climbed as the cable climbed, keeping pace with the ascending cub, until she was close enough to the deck that she could reach the top of the railing and pull herself up. She was back on the bridge surface before the cub cleared the railing. Owen caught the cub in both hands as it came over the edge. It was cold, not the cold of something already gone, but the deep cold of something that had been outside its survivable temperature range for long enough to be in serious trouble, and had not been there quite long enough for that to become permanent. It was shaking. It was alive. He set it on the deck planking. The mother was there in 2 strides. She did the inventory that he had learned to expect from bears, with cubs nose to flank, nose to face, the systematic confirmation that everything was present and functioning. The cub responded to her contact with the urgency of something that had been waiting a long time for exactly this. She made a sound that was different from the sounds she had been making since he'd gotten out of the truck, lower, less compressed, the register of something that had been at maximum tension and was releasing it. She checked him again, then again. Then she looked at Owen. He was standing 2 meters from her on a bridge in the dark, with the wind pushing at his back, and the temperature dropping, and the storm that had been visible on radar since noon, beginning to arrive in earnest. She was a 600-pound apex predator whose cub he was standing beside. These were the facts of the situation, and the fact that she had just allowed him to handle her cub did not functionally change what she was. He did not move. She held the look for a moment long enough that he registered it. Short enough that he could not have said exactly how long. Then she turned north, toward the river ice and the tundra beyond the bridge, and the cub followed her. And in 30 seconds, the dark and the blowing snow had made them invisible. Owen stood on the bridge. After a while, he became aware that he was cold. He got back in the truck. He sat with the heat running and looked at the dent in the hood from when she had placed her forepaws on it at the beginning of all this. He had not thought about it since it happened, had not had the available attention for it. He thought about it now, the weight behind it, the decision behind that, the chain of events that had started with an animal choosing to stand in front of 40,000 pounds of moving freight instead of stepping aside. He had 9 years of experience on this road. He was going to need a different framework. He checked the time, logged his position, and a 2-line note in the trip record wildlife incident. Peel River Bridge, 2347 Stunden. No injuries, no cargo loss, and pulled onto the highway. The storm arrived 30 minutes later. He drove through it and reached the depot at 4 in the morning and slept in the cab until the yard opened. He did not tell anyone what had happened on the bridge for 2 days, not because it was a secret, but because he had not yet found the words that would make it sound like what it was, rather than something else entirely. The highway Owen was driving runs through the southern edge of the range used by the Beaufort Sea polar bear population, one of the 19 subpopulations of polar bears distributed across the circumpolar Arctic. The Beaufort Sea population has declined significantly over the past 2 decades, driven primarily by the loss of sea ice that bears depend on to hunt the ringed and bearded seals that provide the bulk of their annual caloric intake. According to the IUCN Polar Bear Specialist Group's most recent assessment, the southern Beaufort Sea subpopulation declined by approximately 40% between the late 1990s and the early 2010s, a rate that made it one of the most rapidly declining populations in the circumpolar region. The primary driver was reduced sea ice in spring, shortening the critical hunting window when bears accumulate the fat reserves they need to survive the summer fasting period and support reproduction. A female bear in this population typically fasts for 6 to 8 months of the year. She dens in late autumn, gives birth in December or January, and emerges in March or April to a landscape of sea ice that is each year, measurably, without exception in the satellite record going back to 1979, smaller than the year before. The cub on the bridge was one of perhaps a few hundred cubs born to this population in the current cycle. Whether it survives to adulthood depends on conditions that are changing in one direction. The Polar Bear Alert Program and the Canadian Wildlife Service maintain monitoring programs across the Beaufort Sea habitat range. Polar Bears International funds both field research and climate advocacy that addresses the root conditions driving the population decline. The link is in the description below. If this video stayed with you, please like and subscribe.